So we are in the middle of a course creation challenge using Udemy, where there happens to be a 45-day course creation challenge happening now. So Udemy gave us this great outline telling us that the first thing we should do is define our course topic and target students, which we did in the first week. But in addition to really talking about what our course content might be and who our students might be, we actually did kind of a nice exercise where I asked you, and this is going to help you catch up if you weren't here, to think about what some of your main values are and list those. I did mine. And then think about what you feel like is your why. Like, what is your passion? What are some things that really mean a lot to you, that matter a lot to you? What do you feel are some things that are more like aligned with your purpose in being here? And then think about the experiences that you've had, both personally and professionally, that really shape the unique message that you might bring to a course. And then I asked you to think about what some of your superpowers are, particularly ones that might be relevant to a course that you would create. And then what are some of the things other people say about you that you may or may not agree with? Then I had you think about what are some topics that it would be really easy for you to do a course creation challenge on, things that you've talked about, read about, know a lot about. And then finally, as you think about who your target audience is, who would you think would want to consume something that you put together and why? What sort of context or situation might they be in? So please take a moment, re-listen to that if you need to, and go ahead and answer those questions for yourself so that you can get going on getting the material that we then in week one pasted into Chat GPT or whatever AI you might be using. So what I basically said is I want to create an information product, a course on udemy.com, and I want to pick a topic that suits me. Can you help me choose a course to create that is centered around my values and my life's purpose, which are, and I took the results of those first two questions and pasted them in here. And then I said, um, my strengths and life experiences are, and then I listed those. And then I said, and I can easily create content in these areas. And I listed those. And then I said, my target audience is. So I basically took all those things that we said and put them together into a Udemy prompt. And I'm putting all of this in your handout, so don't worry. And then ChatGPT took over and gave me some ideas on what types of course content I could put together. And then you can actually go from there and ask it to flesh out the content into teaching points. You can ask it to help you come up with activities. Those are all things that you can use AI to help you with. So it's just chat.openai.com to get started on ChatGPT if that's something you'd like to do. So after week one, people came back. They had a topic. We spent some time talking about people's topics. We had a great just time of sharing. And then it came time to take a look at the week two required activities. So basically, when I look at this course creation outline, step one, define your course topic and target students. Now, I will say that you probably want to go into a little more depth identifying things about your target audience, creating a buyer persona. In the handout, I've got some activities for you to do to go deeper into that. And then step two here says to create your learning objective. Now, interestingly enough, in the world of instructional design, there is a lot out there on learning objectives. In fact, I was a trainer for years and didn't really know about some things that seemingly everybody knows about when it comes to creating learning objectives. For example, people know about a process for creating learning called the ADDIE process. They know how to write learning objectives by going through something called Bloom's taxonomy. It's all very interesting. So I would like to show you just a little of that, and then we'll do our activity for this week that will help us put everything together. So here we go. So that Addy thing that I shared with you um, is actually just the order in which you might put together learning. So you basically do your analysis, you design your course, you develop your course, you implement it, and you evaluate it. Well, that's a little different than the outline we have for what we're about to do. But one of the things that it is important to do is make sure that the course is effective. And that's where this thing comes in. It's called Gagne's 9 Events of Learning. So notice right here, we've got present the content. And if that's all we had to do to be able to create learning, we wouldn't need to be as good as we are. But the first thing you have to do is gain the attention of students, which is why it's important to have that title that speaks well to people, to have good keywords, to have learning objectives that are compelling, to have actually session titles that are also answering what it is the students want. Once we get their attention, then we have to attach what we're training them on to something they already know. There are actually theories of learning that say that our memory kind of works like a brick wall, that if I need to add a new piece of learning, I have to have something to attach it to. I can't just put a brick up here with no bricks around it, or it'll just fall. So the idea of getting their attention and then letting them know what they're going to learn, and then stimulating the recall of prior learning so that they can go, oh, I see how this fits into what I already know. And if we don't do that, if we just present content without doing that, then it's probably not going to be very effective. So we deliver this great content, and if we stop there, it's also not going to be effective. We have to then go and provide learner guidance. So how might that be useful? Where might you apply this? And then we might want to give them a chance to practice and give them some feedback and help them be able to assess how they're doing, and then maybe give them an action plan so that they can use what they've learned. So as you think about how a Udemy course is put together, it does have the compelling title and the compelling modules so that they get the attention and the objectives. You want to do a nice introduction. You want to give context for each of the things that you train on. And then, of course, there need to be activities and exercises and maybe outside resources for them to be able to apply what they've learned. So one of those ingredients is these learning objectives, and Udemy says to create learning objectives. And in fact, if you take a look at the page where Udemy describes the need to create learning objectives, then what it basically here in Udemy itself says, create your learning objectives. It tells you why they're important, and then it says, use a descriptive verb that aligns with the level of understanding to explain what learners will be able to do and write your learning objective. And it says here, Bloom's taxonomy is a common framework that describes 6 levels. Boom. So Bloom's taxonomy, it's kind of fascinating. He's basically saying that, learning is not all the same, that if I'm just telling you something and inviting you to know it, that's different than if I need you to go deeper and understand it. So he started out with something that looked like this, and then he updated this thing called Bloom's taxonomy, updated to where now it looks like this. So that the lowest level of learning is like just knowledge, just, okay, you shared it with me and I might be able to remember it. And then, so think about in school when it was a spelling word, you just had to memorize it. But then if you then said, well, there are these spelling rules like I before E, except after C, and when sounded like A, as in neighbor and way, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, and now some things start to click, you understand. And then you go out in the world and you come across the movie title Weird Science and you notice the word weird is spelled W-E-I-R-D and it breaks the rule of I before E except after C and when sounded like A as in neighbor and way. And so now you're able to find some practical application. And then maybe you analyze it. Why is weird such a weird word where it doesn't follow that that rule, right? And that are there other words like that, right? So now you're analyzing. Now you go in and you might evaluate. You might say, okay, it might be that these words have different word origins, right? Let me go and study which word origins produce the I before E and which ones produce the anomalies. And then after you discover that, you might actually say, wait a minute, I've got a better rule. I've got one that doesn't have as many exceptions as the I before E rule does. Here's my new spelling rule. Boom, you've gone through all those levels. So the idea is that you want in your training, in your course creation, to have a situation where people have these higher order levels of learning that they're able to apply. Which brings me to when academic designers design learning objectives, they actually use these action verbs that correlate with the different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. So if all you want them to do is know stuff, remember stuff, these are some action verbs that can describe that. But if you want them to go higher to where they're able to understand, they're able to apply, they're able to analyze, synthesize, even create, then these are some action verbs that are used to create these learning objectives. So I'm giving this to you, and yet there's really one more place that I'd like to take you to really put this together. So we said in week 1, we wanted to figure out our topic and we kind of evaluated ourselves. But it also said that you needed to take a look at your target audience. And one of the things that I created a long time ago was the Prindle's Dozen. It was a formula of little 14 P's that you really needed to figure out about your audience in order to be able to market effectively to them. So you kind of start out with your purpose, which we did in week 1, your product, which we also looked at in week 1, what's your topic? Then we also looked in week 1 at who are your people, what's your target audience? Again, get a little bit more into depth if you'd like. We also explored who you are, the positioning of how you're different from others. Now, better than that process that I just showed you is the pain, pleasure, process formula. The way really to do those first 3 parts of Gagne's 9 events, where you get their attention, you let them know the objectives, and you help them recall other learning that this relates to, is to catch them in their need. So someone has to want or need your course in order to buy it and spend the time going through it. So another word for need is pain. And the idea is that if I need something, then I might buy it. But if I'm hurting, then my need deepens into pain. So you want to ask questions like, what do they suffer from that what they could learn in your course might solve? What are some things that keep them up at night? What are their fears and frustrations and barriers and complaints that relate to the topic that you want to create a course on? So I took a look at this with the topic that I was looking to create a course on. So I'm doing a course on passive aggressive communication. So I think about someone who's passive aggressive. Do they know they're passive aggressive? Maybe. So if they do, then maybe they're like, why am I so passive aggressive? Where does that come from? How do I stop it? But most people who are passive aggressive probably don't know they're passive aggressive. So instead, they find themselves saying things they don't mean, being misunderstood, thinking that they're being helpful, but getting the ire of other people. And I could brainstorm for 10 or 15 minutes and come up with all kinds of things that I think all of us could relate to because all of us are probably passive aggressive communicators sometimes, right? So then, instead of the learning objectives are by the end of this course, you will be able to identify passive aggressive behavior. You will be able to, right? Like those Bloom's taxonomy things. Instead of that, it becomes this thing that says, when people misunderstand you, do you wonder what it was that you said or did that led to the misunderstanding? How many times do you feel frustrated at having said something that wasn't the right thing to say? And you're just trying to be helpful, and somehow it still doesn't work out. Do you see how I'm getting your attention? Do you see how I'm establishing the need for the course by helping you identify with your pain? Now we start to figure out, oh, so each of the modules in my course should probably speak to each of those pain points so that whatever title I come up with, right, whatever description I come up with, whatever learning objectives I come up with will come from this as well. But boy, once I really want to do a comprehensive map of what are each of these pain points, because each of these pain points should probably be a module in the course that I'm designing. Does that start to make sense? So now the other side of it's important too. And that's what I call pleasure, which is what will be different after they take your course. So that's where you start asking questions like, what would they really like to see happen? What would make them happy? What would be a good victory for them? Right. And the same way, I spend some time and I really take a look at all of those, you know, being able, I think about times that you are proud of your communication. You say, I stood up for myself. I was assertive, but not offensive. I stayed calm and composed in the middle of a conflict situation. I was articulate and clear about what I wanted, and nobody misunderstood me. Like, think about those types of things. Think about what then the implications of that is. So, like, what are the specific things that they would be able to do? But also, one step deeper, having established that they're able to do those things, then what might be some outcomes from that, like getting a promotion, being able to get along better with people, being able to have a closer family relationship, being able to, right, go out in social situations and not feel awkward. All of those pleasure points, because those also are going to be the source of language for your course description, your course objectives, and your module names. And then there's the process. How will you go about sharing this? Combination of articles, handouts, course videos, but quizzes, activities. What are all case studies, right? What are all the different things? And putting all of that together is what we're doing to create not just the learning objectives, but the course outline. So as you look at weeks 1 and 2 of the course creation challenge, you might think that deciding the content and putting together the outline should take longer, but not really, because the long, laborious part is probably the video editing. But I'm going to show you how to do that faster. But really picking your topic, picking your target audience, and then leveraging the pain and pleasure that your target audience feels so that you're not creating learning objectives for the sake of creating learning objectives. They're actually learner objectives, the objectives that the learner has in being in the program and how things will be different. So I'd like you to take this activity and put together what might be your course objectives. Who are your learners? What would their course objectives be? And I'm going to still say, I think that Udemy kind of says it backwards because, it says that you should, step number one, actually, let me go back to the little outline piece. Step number one, pick your course topic. Okay, we kind of needed to do that. But to me, it's picking your target student, step number one, figuring out their pain and pleasure. And from there, you know that each of the pain points needs to be a part of the outline of the course. Then you look at the pleasure side. That should be where your learning objectives come in. And then when we take a look at making activities and assessments and handouts and all those good things, then that's the how, that's the process. So pain, pleasure, process. Here's your homework. Look at your audience. Spend as much time as you can taking a look at all the pain points. And something I didn't mention a minute ago is look at it from multiple angles. So we talked about the pain points of the person who is the passive aggressive communicator. We talked about the person who might know they are passive aggressive, the person that might not know they're passive aggressive, and the fact that everybody has their passive aggressive moments. Let's also take a look at people who are dealing with passive aggressive people. We need to probably have some components on that. So what are the pain and pleasure on that? Do all that brainstorming and then kind of outline, these are the main parts of the course, like course modules I feel like I need to cover to be able to solve all of those problems that we uncovered as we looked at pain. Therefore, the course objectives are, how are things going to be better when you've done those? So really do a little outline of your course, what modules might there be, and a list of your course objectives. Do make sure to go to udemy.com to look at some examples of other people's courses so that you don't kind of do something that doesn't match the culture of Udemy. Also, meanwhile, we would like for you to create and submit a test video and send it into Udemy so that you can see what else you need to do to be able to be prepared to submit your course. We don't want to do that at the last minute. We want to be kind of running our tech right alongside of creating our course. We'll see you next week.